I'm starting a bit of a series where I oversee the recruitment of the teams in the Premier League. We're going to take them about 3 teams at a time, and I'm going to become a bit of a director of football. I'll oversee the transfer proceedings, selling and buying players, and trying to keep things vaguely realistic. Trying to think about actually what does this squad need to be able to achieve the goals of that particular team. I'll then hand back the match-going responsibilities to the actual manager of the club, who I've put in the game as the assistant manager, and we'll watch the progress and we'll see whether the transfer business that I've done is successful or not. We're going to start today with the 3 promoted teams to the Premier League, because to be honest, that might just be the biggest challenge. I love transfers. I love talking transfers. I love speculating about what could happen. So this should be fun, right? Come on. So in today's video, we are talking about Leeds, Sunderland, and Burnley, the 3 promoted teams to the Premier League, and the 3 teams, even after I've done the business here, that are predicted to finish in the bottom 3. There is a bit of a trend at the moment where the teams that are promoted are just not good enough to compete with the teams in the Premier League, and they go back down. This is what we're trying to avoid in today's video. I have done the transfer business for Leeds, Burnley, and Sunderland. I've sold players, I've bought players. I've then set them up in the tactic that I think their actual manager is going to play them in. And I've made the assistant manager at each club the real life manager, so that then they can have all of the responsibilities of actually managing the team. Whilst I just do the transfers. I'm the director of football. Now, for each team, this is going to be a bit of a realistic rebuild, with the slight caveat that sometimes it's very easy to get carried away with these things in Football Manager. I'm hoping that some of the conversations we can have through each team can kind of identify where I've been really realistic and where I've kind of had a little bit of fun as well. But I love talking about transfers, so I feel like that can kind of lead into this a little bit today. Let's begin with Leeds, where this is what I've done for their summer transfer business. And this is what their squad is going to look like. We're set up in a 4-2-3-1 a la Daniel Farke, and similar to the system that he used to win the championship this year. Now, on paper, because they won the championship, this should be our best bet of staying in the Premier League this season, but it remains to be seen what's actually going to happen. Now, thinking about what I was going to do for Leeds' transfer business, I did a bit of research, and the general feeling seemed to be that they need to sign quite a lot of players. Now, that might be a theme for all 3 of the teams in today's video, because as we talked about before, this gap between the Premier League Championship, it's daunting for any team coming back up. You are on that massive high of getting promoted, and then quite quickly over the course of the summer, you're thinking, oh God, this could be rough this next season. But let's see if we can fix that. The talk seemed to be, and Daniel Farke himself actually seemed to suggest, that they want probably at least 6 players for the starting lineup for the Premier League this year. I have signed slightly more than 6 players, but probably not loads more than 6 players actually into the starting lineup once we go through it. I've spent £60 million, which, I mean, having a look at it there seems like quite a lot of money. However, we have raised funds of £30 million through sales, including Illan Meslier, who's gone to Nice for £15 million. Now, Leeds fans, let me know what you think about that. All I really see of Meslier, since he was in the Premier League all those years ago, is him dropping clangers all the time. And I really feel like goalkeeper is a priority for this summer. You'll have to let me know, fans of the teams that we're talking about in these videos, let me know how realistic some of these things that we talk about are in the videos. Let me know what your thoughts are. I'm really interested always to hear your thoughts. Like I say, I love talking about transfers. But the first thing I did was try to raise a bit of money, and we sold Meslier for £15 million. I have also shipped out the following. Patrick Bamford has gone to play for Wrexham, now in the Championship. Isaac Schmidt's gone to Basel. Joe Gellart's gone out on loan. Junior Firpo's gone to Girona for £6 million. And then Gabby and Crew have also left the club. It gave us £30 million in incomings, and then I think a net spend of about £30 million. Probably isn't the worst thing in the world, especially if you can beef out the squad with quite so many players as this, especially if you're going to spend big on one of the players, which I have done, in Gustavo Harman. Now, I think Harman obviously has the capability, the ability to play in the Premier League. And with Sheffield United missing out, you may notice in quite a few of the teams today, I've pinched a few of the players, because that's a team full of players that are good enough to get promoted from the Championship. And that might be the best place to shop for some of these promoted teams. Take the best of teams like Sheffield United and then hope that they can make that leap to the Premier League. This man does have Premier League experience. He played a season for Sheffield United, and that's something I've also tried to factor in a little bit. These players that we're bringing in, if they've got Premier League experience, that's a bonus, and that's a good thing to look for. So £22 million, it's quite a big outlay on a player, but I think he's really good, and he will suit this system playing in that number 10 role. So we've gone out and picked him up. The other signings, let's start with then the goalkeeper replacement for Illan Meslier. I've gone for the Angers keeper, Yahya Fofana, who's actually quite highly rated. He's been linked with a few teams in the Premier League and the Championship for that matter. And for £5 million on the game here, I think he's a I think he's a decent replacement for Meslier. So we've brought him in. And then the other signings that we made are Tommy Doyle from Wolves for £10 million. Again, Premier League experience. He might end up leaving Wolves this summer. I think he'd suit a team like Leeds. I think he's a really talented footballer, actually. I just don't quite think he's got a spot in that Wolves team with some of the midfield options that they've got. Players like João Gomez. You're not going to see Tommy Doyle getting in ahead of those, and that's why he probably needs to move this summer. Andre as well in that midfield. So I think he'd be a really good pickup for a team like Leeds. I've gone for Nico Alvedi from Gladbach, who's a very experienced, decent centre-back. We've gone for Alexa Terzic from Red Bull Salzburg, who is a left-back option. I think they will be shopping for a left-back, especially if Junior Firpo does depart this summer. Dennis Mann, he's great on Football Manager. I'd love to see if he could try and translate that to playing in the Premier League in real life from Parma. This is where it might get a little less realistic. And also, I actually have seen that since doing this, James Milner has signed a new contract to Brighton. So this one isn't one that's going to happen. But I think in the future, a move for James Milner back to Leeds feels like something that might just happen. It kind of, in my mind, it felt kind of realistic for this summer just because they're back in the Premier League. Give it 1 or 2 seasons there. But maybe James Milner, I think James Milner thinks he can still play forever. Despite being about 49 years old, he signed that new contract at Brighton. But if he was to end up back at Leeds at some point in his career, I don't think that'd be a surprise for anybody. So I've brought him in for 500k, and then I've done a few free transfers. Some of these realistic, some of them not so much, some of them just for a bit of fun. I've brought in Jamie Vardy on a free. I don't think he's going to stay in the Premier League, but if he wanted to, maybe a team like Leeds could take a punt on him, maybe not as a starter, but as an option. I've also actually brought in 3 strikers here, which I just don't think is going to happen, but they were on a free, so I kind of just went for it. We've gone for Jamie Vardy, Davy Selke, who is a former Hertha Berlin. He's played for a few teams in the Bundesliga. His physicality actually might suit this league. He's 29 now, but he's on a free transfer. Ben Davies, I think, is actually more of a realistic one on a free transfer to go in maybe to play as a left-back option with Terzic here. And then finally, Callum Wilson, who I believe is also in talks to sign a new contract at Newcastle this summer, but for a while it looked like he was going to go out on a free. I think a team like Leeds or one of the promoted teams picking up Callum Wilson, Premier League experience, etc. Could be something that happens. Could be something that you could see happening. Those, though, are the transfers in. This is how we're going to set up. It's going to be Fofana with Bogle and Davies as the left backs. We've also got Terzic, if we want to come in and do that, who is, I mean, arguably as good as Ben Davies. Pascal Struijk and Nico Alvedi as the centre-back partnership. We're going to Ayo Tanaka and Ampadu as the DM partnership. We're going to use Tanaka in a slightly more attacking role here. Now, I do think maybe they might be looking to bring in a defensive midfielder. In this universe, they could use James Milner in this role, I suppose. And of course, Tommy Doyle, who I brought in, is probably going to be an option. At the moment, he is injured, though. And then in front of those, Dennis Mann on the right-hand side, Gnonto's still here, Hamer in behind the striker, then Callum Wilson maybe as the starter. Of course, they've got other striking options as well, like Joel Pirro, Davy Selke that we've brought in, Jamie Vardy that we brought in, Matteo Joseph as well. But this is the Leeds squad. We will, though, be handing over responsibility for all of those team selections and tactical choices to Daniel Farke, but we'll see how he gets on. That is Leeds, though. Let's now move on to Sunderland. Okay, so next up we have Sunderland and Régis Lebris at, I don't know why I've gone for the pronunciation of his name there. We've got his Sunderland team, though, to rebuild, ready for our Premier League campaign. And once again, I've gone quite big in the transfer window. I think slowly as we go through the teams, I'm going to start with these 3 teams and then probably work our way up the table from last season and do the next 3 teams. I think as we get towards the top, I think there might be less business per club. But because of the massive gulf between the Championship and the Premier League, I do feel like you either have to speculate really heavily to try and stay in the league, or you just don't and you almost accept that you're going to go back down again, as a few teams have done quite recently. I don't think those teams have necessarily, though, had a great time of it once they've gone back to the Championship. You've seen teams get that double relegation, like Luton, for example. So I do feel like you almost have to try and spend a bit of money. And one thing for Sunderland is that they do have some money to spend because they've sold Joe Bellingham recently for about £25 million to Dortmund. So reinvesting that money into a bigger squad, a better squad, probably is quite realistic. They've also already signed Enzo Lefebvre permanently, haven't they? So there is money going in and out there, which does inflate these numbers slightly. Also, Joe Bellingham on here is undisclosed. So actually, this would be about £50 million, which makes it a net spend of about 37 million, which again, isn't that ridiculous for a newly promoted team with the money that you get going into the Premier League. So with all of that caveat in place, these are the players that I've gone for. One thing I'm going to mention as well is that I did sign Diego Coppola as a centre-back option, which in Lebris's 3 at the back system, I think would have been fantastic. However, since this point, he's having a medical with Brighton. It looks like he's going to sign for Brighton. So I've signed him, but I've also then signed an alternative that I think is more realistic because they're not doing a Brighton medical, for example. The players that I brought in then are as follows. I've gone for Terem Moffi from Nice. £15 million. I do wonder if this guy will ever actually end up in the Premier League. He feels fairly Premier League coded for me. He's still young enough to make that move, and he's now been playing in France for quite a while, and he's got that experience in Ligue 1. Terem Moffi, I do wonder if he'll ever make that move. So I've gone for him for Sunderland for this summer. They do have Wilson Isidore as their main striker, but I think Terem Moffi as an alternative could be a fun one. I've also spent fairly big, £12.5 million on this man here, Oluwalase Arakadari, who was a Nigerian 6'6" striker, which feels very Paul Onuachu in my mind. But having that big presence up front could be something that we see Premier League teams lower down the table go for. We've seen that success with Chris Wood, for example, at Forest. Maybe that type of approach, that to me, at least, feels like a bit of a blueprint for teams to follow. Be defensively solid, set up in a way that then you can go and have talented, fast footballers, big footballers up front to go and play on the counter. For too long, I think we've seen teams come up to the Premier League and try and play this possession-based football that has got them success in the Championship, and then it isn't replicated in the Premier League. We saw it with Vincent Kompany at Burnley. They went back down. We saw it with Southampton with Russell Martin last season. It's very difficult to do that and make it work. Whereas actually doing the opposite, doing what Forest have done to such effect, might be the way to go. And so some of these signings have been based on doing a bit of a Forest-like job. Sunderland this season. Other players then, Coppola I did bring in, but we're going to ignore that slightly, although he will still be at the club. He will still be able to be used by the manager once we go on holiday as the director of football. I've signed Romain Favre from Bournemouth. He spent time back in France playing more recently with Lorient, who are one of Bournemouth's partner clubs, aren't they? Tom Roth from Union Berlin. I think he could be a fantastic signing for a Premier League team this summer. Really like him. He's a very big left back, a la Dan Burn sort of. Cody Drama from Hull City, formerly of Leeds, formerly of Luton, I believe. Japhet Tanganga is my replacement or my alternative to Diego Coppola. He had a fantastic season last year for Millwall, and it turns out that he's got a bit of a release clause, £1.2 million. I think he could absolutely go and do a job for any of the three promoted teams. There's actually probably some lower down the table Premier League teams that would quite happily have a Japhet Tanganga in their defence. So I think Sunderland could be a perfect home for him this summer. £1.2 million, a bargain for a player that had as good of a season as he had last season. Then I've gone for Romain Mundle back in the Premier League. He's a former Spurs youngster, £1.1 million. And then this one's a bit speculative, but I think it's quite fun. It's very similar to the James Milner signing, but Jordan Henderson on a free for Sunderland. It could be quite nice and poetic and sentimental. It probably won't happen, but, you know, I've gone for it in this one here. Then finally, Facundo Buonanotte was on loan at Leicester City last season. I still don't really see a position for him to play in that Brighton team, so maybe another loan for this year. In which case, I think any of those promoted teams should have a think about picking him up. And that concludes our business in other transfers out. There's not loads of other big ones other than the Joe Bellingham sale. Ignore the Enzo Lefebvre thing. That's a database thing, by the way. We're using an up-to-date database. So some of the transfers that have happened in real life have already happened and they're on the database, like Enzo Lefebvre is here. Similarly, Isidore here, look. But Triantis out, Huggins out, Brown out, Paveda out, and then a load of loans out as well. We've not really lost anybody other than Joe Bellingham this summer. We've kind of built on the team that won the playoffs. And then I think tactically it will look a little bit like this. We're going to have Patterson in goal with Pembele, Ballard and Tanganga as the back three. I think that's decent. I don't think that's too bad. But I've Sirkin at right wing back and then Hume at right wing back. Trey Hume linked with a move away. Wolves looking at him, for example, this summer. And then maybe, imagine this, if you had Enzo Lefebvre alongside Jordan Henderson in that midfield. Now, realistically, we're probably looking at other players to come and play in this midfield spot. Luke O'Nien, for example, rather than Jordan Henderson. But I do like the storyline behind it. So I'm going to put it in there. We'll have Favre on the right-hand side, maybe Isidore off the left with Moffi up front. But then there are other options in there if we need to. We've got players like Buonanotte on loan, for example, to come and play in one of these roles in this attack. Something like this, though, is how we're going to set up for Sunderland. But I'm not going to be playing the games. It's going to be the manager. We're going to put it back in charge of the manager, Regis Lebriz. And we're going to go now and see what I've done for Burnley this summer window. And then finally, we have Scotty Parker's Burnley side to go and do our recruitment for. He's our assistant manager. We're in charge of transfers. And this is what I have gone and done. I've spent £76 million. However, I've also sold players for £65 million. A little bit more conservative in terms of the net spend for Burnley, but a lot of money did come in for Zeki Amdouni, who I sold to Como, and Jordan Bayer, who went to Al Ittihad. So there's about £30 million there. Connor Roberts also did go to West Ham, and then ignore some of the other ones on here, like Marcus Edwards, went for £6.5 million, but also signed for £6.5 million. Obviously, he signed for Burnley. What a coup that is, by the way. Signing Edwards in the Championship. Wild. It kind of goes to show the quality that English football has in it, the Premier League level of player. And then you've got such talented players like Marcus Edwards going to ply their trade in the Championship. Enzo Lefebvre for Sunderland, another really good example of that, isn't it? These are the signings that I have made then. Let's go through in order from the biggest to the smallest then. I have signed for right back Milan van Avik from Coventry. I was actually just really impressed with him in the Championship last season for Coventry. I think he's a really good right back. I think he could definitely make that step up to the Premier League. He's still only young as well. So I think he'd be a really smart pickup for a team like Burnley. So £12 million, I think that's about right. It might be a little bit higher or a little bit, it might be a little bit higher than you'd maybe expect him to go for, but I think that's about right. I've signed him, and then I've kind of followed the same pattern that I followed, I think it was with some of the Leeds signings, and that is picking off the players from teams like Sheffield United, or specifically Sheffield United. I think these two are players that did all right when Sheffield United were in the Premier League, and then they've had good seasons back in the Championship as well. Vinicius Souza, I think has enough quality about him to go and play in the Premier League. £12 million there or thereabouts to pick him up from Sheffield United. I'm sure that they wouldn't want that to happen, but also Sheffield United getting good money in for these players, maybe they would say yes. He's come in, as well as Anel Hamidhodzic, who again showed his quality when he played in the Premier League, and also has been good for Sheffield United, as they're a bit unlucky really. They were the third best team in the Championship last season, but couldn't get over the line once they ended up being in the playoffs, as can happen. I picked him up for £11 million, and then the other signings, Boubacar Traore from Wolves. I don't see a world where he gets in and starts regularly, but is a Premier League player with Premier League experience, very similar to Tommy Doyle in that regard. Husam Aouar, he's a player that never made that move that you'd expected him to make as a young player when he's being hyped up and called the next Zidane, for example. Maybe not quite the next Zidane, but he was really hyped as a youngster, wasn't he? Ended up not really getting that big move from Lyon, ended up at Roma. He's then since then gone to Al Ittihad, look. So maybe bringing him in and playing in the Premier League could be a smart bit of business. He's clearly a talented footballer. We've got Josh Sargent for £7.5 million. We've also got Matt Targett for £5 million to play left back. Then a few players that are actually really here look to ignore. Tommy McDermott for not very much money at all. And then Joe Bevan, because I really like him. Now, if you know why, you can put it in the comment section down below. If you don't know why, get to know why. Joe Bevan, he's just a legend on this channel, isn't he? This, though, is how we're going to set up with Burnley. In their 4-3-3 that Scotty Parker likes to play, we'll have James Trafford in goal. If they keep him, there is the idea that maybe Newcastle will move for him this summer. I think that's been a transfer that's been speculated for about 5 years now. He's going to go to Newcastle at some point. It might be this summer. If it is, you probably have to see Burnley go and sign a replacement goalkeeper. But for now, we're going to go with James Trafford in this video here. Van Avik at right back, Targett at left back, Esteve and Hamidhodzic. I think that's a decent back four, you know. I think that's a decent Premier League back four. It's not crazy, but I think there's quality in there, and I think it's solid. And then James Trafford is a really good young goalkeeper if they can keep hold of him. Then a midfield that has a bit of quality in Vinicius Souza and Husam Aouar. Josh Brownhill has been there and he's done it as well. Marcus Edwards from the right, Koleosho from the left, and then somebody like Josh Sargent leading the line with other options like Lyle Foster and then with other options in the squad as well. Maybe they're lacking that proper goal-scoring striker. Is Josh Sargent able to make that step up? He's had good seasons in the Championship, but can he do it back in the Premier League? Maybe he can. That's what we're going to go with here with this Burnley team today, though. What I'm going to go and do now is, as I said before, hand over all responsibility to our assistant managers. We're going to go and let them play some games and then check back in at certain points during the season to see how the season is progressing, to see how our promoted teams are doing, even if they're predicted to all go back down. Look, this is after the signings. Sunderland's 20th. Burnley 19th and Leeds 18th. We'll probably go through now till about January, and then actually we can think about doing some more transfers in Jan as well. But for now, let's go and get this season kicked off. Okay, I'm actually back a little bit earlier than that. It's the 12th of November, and this is how our three teams are doing with our signings. If we're thinking about that they're predicted to finish in the bottom three, we've only got one of our three teams in those relegation zones in that bottom three right now. After 12 games, Sunderland are 18th. They've won just 2, which is maybe a bit worrying. Only 9 points so far. Luckily for us, though, Fulham and Wolves have both also been very rubbish. So we're still in with a shot of staying up at this stage. But I mean, it is a little bit tricky. We might need to do some January business with Sunderland, I feel like. 2 wins out of 12. Similarly, Burnley have also only got 2 wins out of 12. Leeds have won, I mean, a mammoth 3, but they've also drawn 4 games. Look at the games they've drawn, though. They've drawn to Burnley, which you'd maybe expect, but Chelsea, United and Liverpool. They've drawn away at Old Trafford and away at Anfield as well, which is a very decent, shows that there is some quality in this Leeds team. 3 wins as well. They've beaten Arsenal as one of the wins too. Away at Bournemouth, home to Fulham. They've lost to these teams here as well, though. Leeds are in with a good shot of staying up on 13 points already. They're 4 points clear of that relegation zone. We just need to try and move these teams away, maybe by doing a bit of January business. I'll show you some of the stats of some of the players too, just so you can see who's being selected in the team, because it isn't me choosing the team. So we do have some interesting team selections for some of them. For example, Ayo Tanaka has not been picked once so far this season. Instead, it does seem to be James Milner that starts in the midfield. Even the likes of Tommy Doyle, who I've brought in, haven't played. He's played once off the bench, looks. So some of the signings we've made, not fancied by the manager. That's the thing, I suppose. If you have a director of football, they need to marry up all of their ideas. Palmer as well even has only started 4 games, lots of appearances off the bench. That's because Jack Harrison, it seems like Brendan Aronson actually is playing as the number 10. Then you've got, instead of Gnonto on the left-hand side, it looks like Jack Harrison is playing as that left winger. Gnonto not being used. He wants a new contract, but he's barely being used as well. Seems like a strange choice. Either way, it's actually working all right for Leeds compared to the other teams. Sunderland, this is the situation. We've got some players that I thought would play not playing at all. We've got Pembele not being picked, but instead Jensen Sealt seems to be getting into the team. Pola has played 2 games, but actually Luke 09 maybe starting as centre-back. I'm trying to work out who's, maybe Sirkin starting as a centre-back, and then Roth playing as the left wing-back potentially. I could have a look actually. Can I? Enzo Lafay's barely played as well. Let's have a look at the last team here. They drew to Arsenal, which is actually a decent result. They had Roth at left back, Ballard, Sealt, and 09 as the centre backs. Then yeah, Neil in the midfield with Henderson, Hume at right back, Buonanotte, Isidore, and Moffey. Yeah, no Enzo Lafay in the team there, no Tanganga. Interestingly, not using some of my signings. Maybe we need to go back in the market. We've got 4 million to spend if we could go and do that. These are the results for Sunderland. Very it doesn't make for great viewing, especially in September. Wasn't good, was it? 2 wins here though on the bounce, look, against Villa and Nottingham Forest. That is a really, I mean, picking up 6 points is absolutely golden. That is the 6 points out of what, I mean, they've gotten that 9, is it now? Yeah, 6 out of the 9 in 2 games there. Finally, let's have a look at Burnley as well and see who's been picked and who's not been picked. A couple of players not been picked. Ahmed Hozic not getting in the team, it seems like here. Instead, Dalcoir, Worrell getting into the team as well, maybe over Esteve. I wouldn't go with these 2 personally, but maybe I don't know as much as Scott Parker. Maybe that's it. Vinicius Souza also seemingly not getting in the team over Josh Cullen, it would appear. Josh Sargent as well, not starting. Who's starting up front here then? Is it Lyle Foster? I assume it is, with 11 starts there. Let's have a look at their last game here. They lost to Villa, and this is how they lined up in that one. Trafford, Sambo, that's interesting. Target at left back, Dalcoir and Worrell, as I thought. Cullen, Awar, Brownhill, Edwards, Koleosho, and then they did play Sargent in this game, I suppose. The 1-0 loss to Villa. They've got a load of money to go and spend in Jan if we want to. So maybe we try and speculate a little bit to try and keep these teams in the Premier League. I think this is going to be a really fun challenge for these videos as well, because I'm not in charge of the games. I can't just plug in some ridiculous tactic. It's going to be all about the recruitment, and it will actually be a genuine challenge to make these teams good, because it is a challenge. It is realistic in that regard, isn't it? 12 games in, room for improvement is probably what I'd say. Let's go and play some more games. Maybe, just maybe do some transfers as well, and I'll be back. Okay. It's now February, and, well, the table looks like this. I said this is going to be a challenge. We're in with a shot of staying up. However, we are the bottom 3 teams in the league, and the January window has come and gone. This is genuinely hard work. I have tried to do a bit of January business to try and save these seasons. We're in touch in distance. We've got 19 points each, but teams like Wolves have really recovered, which is annoying. Fulham as well have really recovered. They're up to 25 points and 24 points. Burnley are 18th. Sunderland are 19th. Leeds are 20th. They've all got 19 points. They've all got a very similar record as well. It's 4 wins for Burnley. They beat Sunderland. Look, they beat Newcastle. They beat Bournemouth. They beat Palace. 5 wins for Sunderland. They beat Leeds. They beat Burnley. Beat Chelsea, Forest, Villa. And then Leeds have beaten Forest, Fulham, that Arsenal win we saw before, and then Bournemouth as well. It's rough at the moment. Let me show you what I've done with the January window to see if we can try and fix this. Basically, I've signed 3 players, look, for Burnley. We'll do Burnley first here. 3 players brought in January. We've gone back to Coventry, where I think there are some talented footballers. We've brought in Jack Rodoni to come and play in our midfield. I think there's a lot of quality about him, and he's only 23. He's homegrown, etc. as well. 12.5 million pounds. I've also signed an old favourite of mine on Football Manager, Ludovic Ajorque, another one that I'd love to come and see. I'd love to see him come and play in the Premier League. 7 million pounds. Again, maybe just giving us a better option up front. I was slightly worried about Josh Sargent, and then he wasn't being picked, so signing a new striker kind of makes sense in that regard. Then finally, David Brooks, another player that is a really supremely talented footballer. He's done amazingly to come back from some of the medical issues that he's had previously, but I'm not quite sure he's going to have a starting place in that Bournemouth team. So finding him a new home maybe can unlock the talent that he is, and that one kind of makes sense to me. 7 million pounds. So we spent about 25 million in this January window. We did sell a couple of players as well. We did sell players as well to raise funds. Lyle Foster went for 7 million pounds. I've loaned out Boubacar Traore because he wasn't playing. I've sold Masengo for 5 mil, Benson for 6 mil, and then loaned out Aaron Ramsey and Logan Pye, as well as selling a youngster in Murray Campbell, who's a Scottish youngster. So some money did come in too. Overall, the net spend isn't too crazy, but there is a lot of player turnover here, which maybe you'd say you'd probably try to avoid as many players coming and going just because of turnover. But this is how things are. This is the recent form. The last game actually was that loss against Sunderland. During January, we had 3 draws, but we haven't got a win since those transfers went through. I'm hoping that we can find enough points in this run-in. It's going to be really tough. There's tough games in there as well. Chelsea, City, Spurs, they play Leeds. They play Villa away, who Villa are having a great season, by the way. They are in 3rd place. Look, it's Liverpool, City, Villa at the top of the Premier League. Brentford in 5th. Man United in 4th. What's going on here? That is super unrealistic. That's the Burnley business, though. Let's have a look at Leeds, and this is what I've done with this Leeds team in January. We have signed 3 players. Yohan Bonney from Parma. I think he might make the move this summer, maybe to the Premier League. Sam Johnston as a new goalkeeper from Wolves. And then Kylian Sardella from Anderlecht, so that we might line up a little bit more like this. We're going to have maybe Sardella come in at right back, with Yohan Bonney taking up that striker role, hopefully, and start to score some more goals, because we've really struggled with scoring goals this season. Something like this as the system, potentially. Their recent results have also been up and down. They had a horrible November, December look, but did pick up a league win in January towards the end of the window. They beat Forest. They've just lost to Newcastle. Look at this for a run of games, though. Newcastle, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, Manchester United. It's really not easy in February. Maybe it means there's some games we can win a little bit later on, but Leeds rock bottom of the Premier League after going up as champions. Not ideal. Doesn't say a lot about my transfer business, does it? Can we, or can the managers save it now that we've done some more transfer stuff? Let's see. Finally, though, let's go to Sunderland, and I'll show you what I've done with them in January. Just a couple of signings for them. It's Connor Cody on a free, and then I've signed Callum Doyle from Manchester City for £12 million. We've also had to sell Chris Rigg to Liverpool, which I didn't want to do, and it's very cheap, but it was but we didn't have any choice in the matter. I've also sold Timothy Pembele and Helder, 2 players that just weren't playing. So we've sold them in this January window too to raise a bit of money. That's the Sunderland business, and this is what the Sunderland team might look a bit like. It depends who the manager actually picks, I suppose. But Callum Doyle in the defence, I think, makes them stronger. Connor Cody, a bit of experience. I mean, he's got experience of being relegated, but let's hope that he can avoid that this time. Ballard, Cody, Doyle maybe as the back 3, something like this. Does that make them a bit stronger? I'm hoping it does. But there's a lot to do. Most recently, though, a really big win against Burnley in a relegation 6-pointer look. An 89th minute own goal from Joe Worrell was the goal that won that game there. And before that, their last Premier League win was against Leeds. So they're winning the games against the other relegation candidates. They beat Chelsea as well here. Look, Terran Moffi with the goal in that one. The run-in for them, there's some tough games again, of course. Liverpool, Arsenal. Look at that. They've got that horrible run as well. Look at that. Oh, my word. All the way back to Villa as well. I think Sunderland might be doomed based on this. They've got Villa away, Newcastle away. They've got Liverpool, Arsenal, United, who are actually good now, Chelsea away, and Man City in a run of back-to-back games. They then play Fulham. That run-in might be so important. Fulham struggled early. Wolves struggled early. Leeds, of course, are down there. And West Ham are West Ham are actually 6th. They're actually decent. But they might have to win all of those 4 after this run of games here. I guess we go and find out what happens now. Let's get ourselves towards the end of this season and see can any of them stay up, because otherwise that's just, it really says that my signings are rubbish. Let's go and find out. Okay, I'm back. It's March. We've now got 9 or 10 games to go. So it's 10 games for Sunderland and 9 games to go for Burnley and Leeds. And look at the situation. It's looking pretty dire for both Burnley and Leeds. I'm worried that they've been cut adrift a little bit. They are now 5 points from safety, both of them. They've got actually the same record. Look, the pair of them. 4 wins, 17 losses for both of them. Sunderland, however, have given themselves a genuine chance of staying up here. They are 5 points clear of the relegation zone. They've got a buffer between them as well in Crystal Palace below them. They've had a really good run of form, which I need to share with you. They've lost 1 game in their past 6 games in the Premier League. They lost to Bournemouth, drew to Spurs, but they beat Burnley, as I showed you before. They beat Everton after that, look, with Moffey and Dan Neil scoring the goals. They've beaten Forest 1-0, and they've beaten Newcastle 2-1. This Terry Moffey signing seems to be working out quite nicely. He's got himself 8 goals now in his 29 games this season, so he's actually been a very solid signing. The other big performers, you kind of have to look at Jordan Henderson in this midfield. He's got an average rating of 7.06. He's chipped in with goals. He's been a real leader for them, and actually maybe he's been the catalyst for a team that's going to stay up here compared to the other teams in Leeds and Burnley who are, they're in free fall, honestly. They've got 1 win in like the past 9 or something, and it was in the FA Cup anyway, which they are through to the quarterfinal of the FA Cup. So maybe there's a chance at silverware there. They play Bournemouth away from home in the quarters. In the league, though, look, it's been this horror run, and maybe it's expected. They've lost to Newcastle, lost to Liverpool, lost to Arsenal, lost to Chelsea, lost to United. They then drew to City. It's a good result. They lost to Fulham. Losing to Fulham at this stage, probably not something you can really get away with doing. Next game is a big 6-pointer. They play Burnley. The 2 bottom teams play each other. Look, a win for either just keeps them in contention. A loss, you really feel like they might be down at that stage there. Let's have a look finally at Burnley's form as well, which isn't good. They've lost their last 5 and they haven't won a game since the 3rd of January. It's now the 10th of March. They beat Palace then and haven't won a game since. They're struggling. This massive 6-pointer is going to be a big one. I kind of feel like the way it is right now, and it needs to be almost confirmed, but I think definitely one of these 2 is going to go down. And then I'm hoping one of them can find, maybe with this next game against each other, look, maybe a win here can be the catalyst to save their season. And I'm hoping that Sunderland can continue this and stay up. But let's go and find out. Let's go now pretty much until the end of the season. Okay, so I've actually gone now to the end of the season. It's the final day because this is ridiculous. Leeds they may have saved their season, but also it comes down to the final day. Look at this for a final day. This is what we were completely lacking this season. The promoted teams being competitive. And actually, I'm going to pat myself on the back, literally, physically pat myself on the back, because actually making the teams competitive is a win in my eyes, even though 2 of them, maybe even 3 of them, get relegated on this final day. But think about the way that the promoted teams did this past season. They were completely cut adrift and it was a foregone conclusion for absolutely ages. This time, with my signings, they're in contention. Leeds are 17th. They've had a fantastic run at this end of this season. They've picked up points. They're also got themselves to the FA Cup final. They play Manchester United in the FA Cup final. That is a huge game. And I'm hoping that, it hasn't distracted them from the Premier League because they've managed to pick up points. They play Spurs on the final day away from home. Before that, they've beaten Everton. They've drawn with Sunderland, which is a huge... how important might this 93rd minute equaliser from Ethan Ampadu end up being for this season? Because have a look imagine Sunderland win that game. They'd now be on 33 points and Leeds would be on 31. They would swap and it could just be a completely different story. Before that, they drew to Crystal Palace. They lost to Brighton and Wolves. They beat Brentford, which is a great result. Again, really late show. Dennis Mann at 87th minute and Johan Bonney in the 94th minute. They beat West Ham. They drew to Burnley. There was that massive 6-pointer I talked about ended up being a draw, which didn't really change that much. But it almost didn't completely relegate one of the teams, which is what I thought might happen. So it kept it going. On the final day, these are the fixtures. In fact, I can just go through as well. Sunderland's run of form looks like this. They've been in free fall since I was almost saying that they were safe. Since that point, from March onwards, look, they haven't won a game. They lost 7-2 to Man City. The only points they picked up is a draw against Villa and a draw against Leeds, look. So not great going into their final day game against Wolves, but that feels relatively winnable. They're 14th and it's the final day of the season at home to stay up. That feels winnable whereas Leeds are away at Spurs, and that's tricky. Finally, Burnley, their form looks like this. They have picked up points recently. They drew to Liverpool, could be huge, and they won. This one might be massive. Josh Sargent scored a 96-minute winner from the penalty spot to beat Brighton to pick up a massive 3 points. They also beat Forest 2-1 look earlier on than that and drew to Wolves. So only losing one of their past 5 games is good form going into their final day of the season. They play Brentford, who are 5th away from home. The final day looks like this, and anything honestly can happen. The league's been won by Liverpool, but relegation-wise, it's Leeds, Sunderland, Forest and Burnley all fighting, and I suppose actually Palace just about fighting to stay in the Premier League. Palace have the better goal difference look, and it is a lot better, and really can only get dragged in if there's a massive goal difference swing. So it's probably between these 3 of these 4 teams can go down, which means that at least 2 of my teams are going to get relegated, which is a shame. But which one will actually manage to stay up? And like I said before, I actually am happy that I've made them competitive. And I actually like how realistic this feels rather than just putting in a really good gegenpress system and these guys finishing like 5th and 6th, which I think you see in so many of these videos because that's Football Manager and sometimes it's difficult to make it realistic. Whereas this actually has a bit of challenge about it. So hopefully you enjoy this format. Let me know, by the way, do you like this type of video? Do you want to see me go and do videos with the next team? Maybe next time we'll go and do like West Ham, Wolves, Everton, for example, like the next little block of teams just above those, that bottom 3 there. Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your feedback, especially even if there's something like, oh, maybe you could do a bit more of this. Maybe we could see more games, etc., etc. Let me know what you think. I'd love to, obviously I try and tailor everything that I do for your guys' enjoyment. That's sort of the point of the enterprise, isn't it? Now though, we're going to go and see what happens in this final day. Here it is then, the final day has been played, and my word, what a story. What a ridiculous end to the season this is. This is our final Premier League table, and as you can see, Sunderland have avoided relegation. It's Leeds relegated despite their good turnaround in form. They go back down. Sunderland have turned it around. After a horrible run of form, they managed to get the win on the final day. I said that this Wolves game here felt winnable, and they did go and win it. They've beaten them 2-0. Terran Moffey and Jordan Henderson, 2 of my signings, scoring the goals that keep Sunderland in the league on the final day. They swap positions with Leeds. Burnley have finished bottom. They lost to Brentford. They have been pretty atrocious. It's 29 points though, like 5 points off survival. They ran it relatively close, didn't they? And then finally, Leeds, they had a tough last game of the season, to be fair, away at Spurs. They lost 3-0, and that meant that Sunderland, with a win, have leapfrogged them to finish 17th. So 2 of my teams did get relegated, but you know what? I'm all right with that. It feels realistic. It's been a lot of fun to do. The last thing that I need to show you was Leeds did get themselves to an FA Cup final, didn't they? And they played Manchester United in that FA Cup final, and they lost. They lost 3-1. Dennis Mann scored, but Man United won the FA Cup. So a pretty miserable end to the season for Leeds, actually. Relegated and lost the cup final. But there we go. Let me know what you think of this as a format. Let me know if you want to go and see more videos like this. Leave a like on the video. It really does help. Most importantly, though, go and have a lovely, lovely rest of your day. I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.